This is a great interview to show you how traditional finance, how they're really going to warm up to the altcoin space. The news anchor here, he makes the comment, Ethereum seems so much more interesting because being outside of simply digital gold or a currency, you get dApps and tokenization and stablecoins, DeFi, and just all this really exciting stuff. And so it's going to move beyond Ethereum into the broader crypto space. And so you got to get ready for that moment. I think it'll be 2025 before we start seeing more ETFs, things like Solana, XRP, Cardano, Polkadot, like Avalanche. These things are on their way. And there's going to be a lot of interest there because of the same things we see. The fact that you can build all these businesses and there's all that utility and you can do a lot of really interesting things. So the question is, at launch, how much interest is there going to be in an Ethereum spot ETF? We really want it to be successful because that's going to pave the way for everything else. Currently, right now, Ethereum about 25% to a third of the market cap of Bitcoin, depending on when you're looking at it. So logically, if we see somewhere along that same type of volume, about 25% of the Bitcoin ETF, that would be a massive success and still one of the greatest ETF launches of all time. So we're rooting for that. We want to see it, and then we'll move on to the broader crypto market. What will be next on deck? Well, it really will be where's the demand in 2025? Who has the hot hand? Right now, it's no doubt Solana. That doesn't mean that will be the case next year. Things change very quickly in crypto. And as they issue these ETFs, all they're going to care about is it compliant? Is it on a path to meet future regulations? And is there a lot of demand there, significant demand? That's what's really going to drive what the next ETF is. And it's going to, we're going to see ETFs for most of your major cryptocurrencies out there. It's not just going to be 2 of them or 3 of them. It's going to be like anything else. So let's listen to this video.
Ethereum is, I think, 25% off its March high. I think Bitcoin is similar, maybe 23% off the March 52-week high. Any thoughts on what's driving crypto prices now, and is the spot Ether ETF coming at all playing into the prices?
Yeah, it's really interesting because if you look at the spot price of Ether, it's actually down over 20% since those 19B4s were approved on these spot Ether ETFs we're talking about. I think that just shows some general weakness in the markets right now. And as I think about spot Ether ETFs coming to market and what the demand might look like and how that might impact the spot price of Ether, if you look right now, the underlying spot Ether market is about 1/3 the size of the spot Bitcoin market. And I think that's a decent proxy for what to expect from spot Ether ETFs, about 1/3 of the demand of Bitcoin ETFs. If that happens, we would still be talking about one of the most successful ETF launches ever. Spot Bitcoin ETFs were the most successful ETF launch in the industry's history when you take into account the 10 or 11 ETFs that came to market viewed cumulatively. I think spot Ether ETFs could be the second most successful launch ever. And if that's the case, I would expect that to drive some demand and potentially positive price action.
And that's really wild if you think about it. This very niche technology, this emerging asset class, the most successful ETF launch of all time with Bitcoin's ETF, and Ethereum might be number 2. And you don't think they're going to want more of that, more of those inflows that demand that capital under management? Of course they do. They're going to need this. Now, I think there's a couple things working against Ethereum right now. The market is on a downtrend. We'll see if that continues. Maybe this Ethereum ETF can turn things around. I don't know. But not only do you have fees with the ETF, and they're quite reasonable, unlike the Bitcoin ETF, where the only thing you're losing is that very small fee and self-custody, of course. With the Ethereum ETF, as it stands now, you're losing staking as well. So to hold the asset directly is a much better deal. Of course, you have no fees and you can stake your Ethereum and earn yield. And we can't do that right now. So this might be a more popular option for those that do not have the ability to, buy it direct and stake it. Asset managers, pension funds, endowment funds, things like this. I think once we do get staking, then that's going to be a game changer because now you have an ETF that gives you crypto exposure and gives you, monthly or quarterly dividends paid to you and more Ethereum I think that'll be quite popular. It'll be interesting to see how successful this is going to be. We expect it'll either be this week or next week, and we'll see again how much demand is there. And even if it starts off slow, and we're in a little bit of a doldrum here for the crypto space, this market will start gaining steam again, and that will be a very popular ETF. You'll see a lot of money flowing in, and that will set the stage for other altcoins. And you're going to hear it in here, how excited they are about utility and all the different use cases that you can build out with altcoin blockchains. And so it's going to get really exciting as we go forward. You're in crypto at the perfect time, right before really this direct integration with traditional finance. It's going to be amazing.
All right, Nate, I'm having a little bit of a sound problem hearing you, but I want to just turn to you, Matt. And one thing is, I think for sure here, the launch of a spot Bitcoin ETF, has been a big success this year. In the first half of a typical year, maybe we'll put up the data here, most of the inflows into ETFs are typically plain vanilla passive index funds, the S&P 500 ETFs, NASDAQ 100 ETF. That's still true if you look at the data. Most of the inflows are passive ETFs, but two of the top ETF inflows this year have been into spot Bitcoin ETFs. So the iShares Bitcoin Trust, I think, is number 4 there. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Let me fix this a little bit so you can see it. This is wild. Look at this. How do we make this a little bit smaller? You look at the top ETF inflows. Absolutely crazy. The Vanguard S&P 500, iShares, S&P 500, the QQQ, and number 4 is the iShares Bitcoin Trust. That's wild. That has more inflows than we had the Vanguard Total Stock Market ETF. Just amazing at launch in a growing asset class, something that people are still really wrapping their minds around. To be that successful, to get more inflows than the Vanguard Total Stock Market, like, you couldn't imagine that type of success, and it's just going to continue and extrapolate and flow through the rest of cryptocurrencies. And we're going to see massive growth as we go forward, and we get, directly integrated within traditional finance.
Maybe iShares, yes, there it is. That's right. 17.7 billion. And then the Fidelity Bitcoin Trust is number 8. So for those of you who don't know, folks, that's pretty impressive for a niche product to be in what may be a record year, to be in 2 of the top 10. I'm trying to figure out what's a method or way to look at this. That seems successful to me.
I think it's a massive success by any measure, Bob. If you look at that iShares product, it's the most successful ETF launch of all time. Even if you look at Bitwise's product, the Bitwise Bitcoin ETF, BITB, we're growing faster than the gold ETF when it first launched in 2004. By any measure, these are the most successful launches of all time. And that's why I think many people, including Nate and myself, think there's going to be significant demand on the Ethereum side if we see that as well. So these Bitcoin ETFs were huge.
Well, I'm trying to figure out how to judge this. I mean, for example, this is a niche product, okay? So we're dealing with crypto ETFs. In 2016, 17, 18, we had a whole rush into tech ETFs, for example, specialty tech ETFs like cryptocurrencies, and we had significant inflows back then into these specialty tech ETFs, and it was about the same, right? I mean, I'm trying to figure out, is the numbers indicate that this has been successful by any measure, right?
Yes, I think that's what the numbers say. I think what you're seeing is this sort of the birth of a new asset class. I think the right analogy to make is back to the original gold ETF approval in 2004. And the thing I find interesting there, which people forget, that was one of the most successful ETF launches of all time. It pulled in $1.5 billion in 2004. But guess what, in 2005, it did more than 3 billion. In 2006, it did more than 4. In 2007, it did more than 5. It kept building year after year. And that's what I don't think people realize about these Bitcoin ETFs. This was a huge first half, but I think the second half could be bigger. And I think next year could be bigger than that.
Right, but you're using the gold.
And there's another reason to expect massive growth, and it's the fact that, yes, these ETFs have been launched, but a lot of your asset managers, they haven't started putting people's funds into this yet. They're starting to get that infrastructure set up. So in a lot of ways, we haven't even seen the flood of money that is going to come here in the near future. And what's so exciting is it's not just like, you have gold, gold ETF, and I guess you could say silver, things like that. But, you have this equally, maybe more exciting space within altcoins where you can do all this wild stuff and build all these, dApps and infrastructure of the future. And you're going to hear it here shortly. They're going to look at that and go, wow, that seems like what we want. This is something beyond just simply, digital gold. This truly is the future.
ETF as a model, is that what basis do we have for believing that's going to happen?
Yeah, well, if you think about gold back in 2004, it was a niche commodity that wasn't in mainstream portfolios, and it was hard to buy. You could buy gold miners, or you could buy closed-end funds. That's the same with Bitcoin. It's a relatively niche commodity. It's not yet in mainstream portfolios. It was hard to buy. But all of a sudden we get a Bitcoin ETF. All of a sudden Larry Fink's talking about Bitcoin on CNBC, and now it's moving into the mainstream. And I think that's going to be a multi-year story.
Nate, does that make sense to you? Is the gold ETF launch in 2004 analogous to what we might be seeing with Bitcoin and eventually with Ether?
Yeah, so I do think that's the case. And just to add some context around the debut of spot Bitcoin ETFs, if you look this year, 300 new ETFs have come to market. The top 4 in terms of inflows are all spot Bitcoin ETFs. And again, I just don't think there's any way to categorize the first 6 months of spot Bitcoin ETFs existence as anything other than a monumental success. There's been about 15 billion in net inflows into this category. And overall, assets are north of $50 billion. I think it's remarkable. And just to dovetail on what Matt is saying, I'm pretty bullish on demand moving forward. And the reason is very simple, which is that financial advisors and institutional investors have really only begun wading into these products. You have to remember, many advisors and institutional investors are very rigorous with their due diligence processes. They're going to crawl before they walk and walk before they run. And I think this cohort of investors is actually still learning to crawl. But as they get more comfortable, I think we're going to see a meaningful uptick in demand for these products. And again, I just don't think there's any way you can categorize what we've seen as anything other than a monumental success.
So Matt, spot Bitcoin, we've been talking about the flows here. We have about 15 billion in total inflows. This gets a little complicated, folks, because Grayscale had some outflows, but we've had altogether about 15 billion in inflows since launching 5 months ago. Here's the inflows overall. By any standards, this looks like a pretty successful launch for a niche product. There you see Bitcoin Trust 18.4, and there you are, Matt, 2.3 billion there. Grayscale, as I mentioned, had a pre-existing fund that converted to an ETF. That saw some outflows, but that was more than offset by these significant inflows into the other major players like iShares, Fidelity, ARK, and Bitwise
really, people were
here.
rebalancing
So total
into these
assets now is 51 billion. Of course, this includes Grayscale's numbers as well. And again, I heard estimates that people would be delighted if we got $5 billion a month in the very beginning back in January, and we seem to have exceeded that.
I think that's right. And what's even more remarkable is the flows have been steady, whether Bitcoin's price has been going up or going down. There was this worry in the market that these would be weak-handed buyers, that they would panic the first moment Bitcoin's price hit a period of volatility, which of course it always does. But guess what?
To be honest, I was worried about that as well. Like in crypto, we're used to it. You lose 30% of your investment in a short period of time. Traditional finance isn't really used to that. It's just a Tuesday afternoon for us. But so far, like he's saying, these people are just starting to build out their positions, and they're taking the downturn as a time to continue to add and build that out. We'll see if that continues, especially if we hit some turbulence here in the coming months. But, so far, so good. And I think, again, this just kind of builds the path for the rest of crypto to continue to roll out. And it's not going to be 250 assets like we see listed on Coinbase, but there'll probably be 20, 30 assets that eventually either have an ETF of their own or end up in some sort of bundled product, I would guess.
We had flows in Q1 when the price was going up. We've had flows in Q2 when the price is going down. We've had flows in the last week. What is happening again is people who are starting from zero are starting to build positions in Bitcoin. And as Nate mentioned, they walk and they crawl and they walk and they run, and we're just getting to the walk and the run part. So I really think that consistency is an important part of this flow story.
Yeah. Nate, take out your crystal ball here. What can we expect from the spot Ethernet launch? So what would be a victory? So if we had 25% of the flows of Bitcoin, would that be a victory in 3 months? Would it 50% be a victory? I mean, how are advisors and investors going to compare this to Bitcoin ETFs?
Yeah, I think a victory would be if we see the demand for spot Ether ETFs be about a third of what we saw from spot Bitcoin ETFs. I just go back to what the current market cap is of the underlying. Now, there are a couple of potential headwinds that could limit demand to a certain degree, at least initially. One would be the crypto market that we talked about earlier. It hasn't performed well recently, and perhaps that negative sentiment blunts demand initially. The other thing is that these ETFs won't offer staking initially, and there's a case to be made that perhaps that pulls some demand away from spot Ether ETFs. But again, I would say both of those potential headwinds would be shorter term in nature.
Staking allows you to make money essentially off of your investment. And the SEC specifically excluded that. Why did they exclude it?
I think it's an added complication, and the SEC itself may have some concerns around whether staked ETF qualifies as a security or not. But if you look,
That's going to be outrageous. There's no way they're going to be able to circle back and really make that argument effectively, because the Ethereum network, it can't operate without staking. And so if you allow, this asset class to launch and people pile a bunch of money into Ether, and then you're like, well, guess what? You can't operate the network anymore in a compliant manner. What are you going to do to all those investors? I don't even think it's possible any longer to circle back and make that argument. I think they're going to have to concede it. A lot of that has to do with political pressure. I think that's why we're seeing this at this time. And again, it's going to pave the way for a lot more tokens to get approved. And it's just going to come down to demand. Which assets have sufficient demand? And that will also go to the utility and the things that are built on top of it. But what assets are going to have sufficient demand to warrant this type of product? And it's going to grow from where we are now.
look at the Ethereum market, more than 2/3 of all ETH out there is unstaked. Most people investing just want to get exposure to this asset, which is up thousands of percent over the last 5 years. The staking would be icing on the cake. We're not getting it in this
It'd be
V1.
huge.
I think we and others hope that in the future we'll be able to add it to ETFs or add ETFs that stake. But this is a great first step.
Has it been settled that Ether is a security or not a security? Has it been?
Well, you don't get a pronouncement. That's unfortunately not the way regulators work. I think a lot of people take comfort in the fact that we are getting or at least we hope to get a regulated ETF. That would remove some of the regulatory obscurity around Ethereum and move us forward. But you never get a firm pronouncement that it is one thing or the other.
And the market cap of Ether versus Bitcoin is about 25%?
Yeah, it's about 25% to
Right.
a third. Yeah, that's
So Nate, that was the point Nate was just making, that if 25% of the volume would be a victory, it would be on par with Bitcoin's market cap then. So that's a reasonable number, 25%?
That would be a huge success. I do think we will get there, but to contextualize that, remember that the Bitcoin ETFs were by far and away the most successful of all time. The number one ETF before those gathered $5 billion in 1 year. So if we get 5 or 10 or $15 billion in the first 2 years of these Ethereum ETFs, that is a massive runaway success. Now, I do think that's where we're going. Could take a few months to build, but it would be both achievable and remarkable, and I think would set up Ethereum to do very well.
Yeah. And of course, Ethereum is essentially smart contracts too. And it's a different technology really than Bitcoin. I find that personally, I know we haven't talked about that, but I find Ethereum far more interesting than Bitcoin as an intellectual concept.
I think a lot of people do, and I think that's going to drive demand. When people say Bitcoin, they think digital gold. When they say Ethereum, they think tokenization, they think stablecoins, they think DeFi. If you want to invest in those things, if you want to invest in the growth of tokenization, Ethereum is like the picks and shovels play. It underpins all of it. You can't have tokenization today without Ethereum. You can't have a robust stablecoin market.
Yeah.
And I think that is going to appeal
Well, this
to
is
a
what
lot
made
of
it
people.
excited me, because DeFi is much more exciting to me than the idea of a new currency created ex nihilo, out of nothing, essentially. Because with smart contracts now, you have the possibility to do real estate transactions. You could do stock settlement. You send money to a friend in England. You can do almost anything with that. That is exciting, because that essentially utilizes the blockchain concept.
You can make everything faster, you can make it cheaper, you can make it more efficient. We just got all excited about moving stocks from settling 2 days to 1 day. This is 2024, it's still taking a day. ETH could make that effectively instantaneous and effectively free. So I agree that there's a lot to be excited about in terms of what Ethereum, tokenization can do to improve finance.
This is going to get crazy as we go forward. You know, if you truly believe in the utility and in the future and whatever blockchains you are invested in, that should excite you, because you know, whether it's XRP and payments or Solana and gaming or Cardano and, you know, just all of these other assets, if you get the winners here, if you're excited about Ethereum, you don't think they're going to be excited about these other blockchains as well. And I think once we get clear regulations, which is the next step here, you know, they can't fully integrate this. They're kind of front running everything, right? We're not really sure what is legal, what is not. They're kind of pushing a few through here, but regulations are close. And now you're going to have your heavy hitters start building on top of these blockchains. And you're going to have all sorts of systems that are used in the real world above and beyond, you know, trading for crazy NFTs or you know, gambling with different DeFi like we see it used today. We're talking about real institutional DeFi, just massive stuff that's just on the horizon. And so they're going to be having this same conversation in 2025 about a lot of altcoin networks. Like, you know what? Ether, Bitcoin, that was exciting, but this is the big one. Like, we've all been through this cycle within crypto. And I don't mean to downplay how important Bitcoin is and having sound money. And, you know, that is, you know, so profound. But I'm telling you right now, the altcoin space is going to drive a lot of excitement because of all the things you can build on top of those blockchains and just disrupt industry. And I think that gives you a glimpse of the future. Someone admitting on air that, yeah, sound money, that's exciting. But this stuff, man, that sure seems like where the ticket is. You're going to see a massive expansion here. So just get ready. Get all your chips in a row. I don't know how long this downturn goes for. Is it a week, a couple months, a quarter? But we're eventually going to come firing out of here. And that's a glimpse of what's on our horizon. And it's going to be absolutely massive, like we could only imagine. Let me know what you think down below. As always, please like, please subscribe. The revolution will be televised right here on Jungle Link.